This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were glad you're here on a Tuesday afternoon. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program. We were talking about the balance sheet with Garrett toay from Ag Trade Talk about the fundamentals with Garrett. Then we were listening from an agronomist in the University of Illinois about the planting prep for corn and beans in central Illinois. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold. On May 12th is the balance sheet with the world supply and demand report from USDA. The report was coming out for the planting intention report on March 31st. The tax bill is moving forward in Congress in Washington, D.C., but some Republicans disagree on the tax on the rich. This tax bill had a farm bill payment of compensation to the farmers. Finally, a couple of days ago, we seen the planting get done before the start of this planting season. That's your rural news on this afternoon. This is your commodities markets for this afternoon, sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. May corn is down at 9 to 4 cents. July corn is down at 5 to 10 cents. May beans are up at 5 to 4 cents. July beans are up at 4 to 8 cents. Kansas City wheat is up for today. KC May wheat is up at 3 to 6 cents. KC July wheat is up at 9 to 5 cents. Chicago wheat is up at 4 to 6 cents. Chicago September wheat is up at 9 to 4 cents. Looking for the livestock markets for today. April cattle is up at 3 to 6 cents. June cattle is up at 5 to 10 cents. May feeder cattle is up at 5 to 10 cents. August feeder is up at 3 to 6 cents. June hogs is up at 5 to 10 cents. August hogs is up at 3 to 6 cents. This been your commodities markets update for this afternoon.
We don't want to plant if the soil is too wet just because of, that's not a good start for the crops. It's probably going to have a negative impact on emergence and establishment, and you're not setting yourself to having a good stand.
Cold, wet soil is not great to emerge from the ground. Giovanni Perez Bonite. He is an agronomist from the University of Illinois. He said that we don't want to planting the seeds in the soil is cold. It will be problem with emerged from the seeds.
So when we look at corn, overall, what we found is that, and again, this is looking at the economic optimum plant density, right? So overall, what we found in our research is that we kind of maximizing the highest dollar return to seed when we have population densities of about 34 to 36 plants per acre. For soybeans, we see the maximum return to seed is around 115,000 plants to 120,000 plants per acre.
Giovanni Perez Bonite. So when we look at the corn overall, and again, we were looking for the economic impact on the crop. The University of Illinois agronomist said the seeds rates keep conservative numbers of the rates for right now with the row in the field. The corn prices are $4.65 and beans prices are $10.03. This audio by Todd Gleason from the University of Illinois Extension. We were talking about the balance sheet with Garrett toay from Ag Trade. Talk about the fundamentals with Garrett. How are things in Northwest Illinois?
Things are going very well up here. Excuse me. They starting anhydrous is on. A lot of fertilizer going on. We're trying not a whole lot of planting, but we've had annoying rains, not heavy rains, but just enough to keep us out. But we're dry, so if we get some sunshine, I think guys would go pretty hard. But just enough rain to keep us out of the field, but we're dry, and if we had some sunshine, it's just soaking everything in. So oats are in, the grass is seed, alfalfa's in, but maybe some, I'd say beans are less than 10%, and there's really probably no corn in the area.
Do you see some farmers in the field yet?
Yes, this weekend, Saturday, it was pretty active around. We're far enough north that nobody really tries to plant anything before Easter. So we were working, but we weren't working that hard, if that makes sense. But now that we're past Easter, we'll get going.
Yeah. What is your position on the balance sheet on May 12th, Garrett?
I think May 12th is the first look that we'll get at the new crop 25-26 S&Ds. Obviously, the USDA will incorporate their March intentions and give us a harvested acreage number. I will keep. We talked about this a little bit this morning with our current clients. Is that the 25-year trend year for corn this year is 182.2. And it's 52.9 bushel an acre for soybeans. But in the Feb Ag Outlook Forum, USDA used the 181 for corn and they used 52.5 for beans. So I think the USDA, barring any changes in planting pace between now and then, probably sticks closer to those numbers, which is 181 for corn, 52.5 for beans, and then go from there. I'm sure the USDA will probably try to incorporate some sort of impacts of the trade war and new crop soybean S&Ds, which means probably reduced soybean exports. And then corn, it's really I don't think the numbers are going to be too overly important. I think it's really going to be the S&Ds after the June acreage number that really are more important because I think it's possible we could have a fairly tight, May new crop corn S&D. I think there's still people looking at old crop S&Ds and expecting, further cuts and carry out there because of increased exports. But the corn S&D needs a certain amount of acres to prevent it from being tight next year. And so there's the market still has a bit of a job here.
What was your thoughts with the planting intention report with comparing to the balance sheet, Garrett?
Well, I think, there's two aspects to look at. I think that, the 95.4 million acre number, I don't think it was necessarily a surprise to anyone. However, we transitioned fairly quickly into a weather market because of the 94.4 million acres we had in the March intentions, the majority of that year-over-year increase in acres came out of the mid-south and delta, and that region has been nothing but wet since then. So I think that the part of the problem is that the risk of is that the March intentions acres are threatened because of spring planting and water issues in Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, those areas. So, the question is whether, they may lose some acres down there. Are we going to pick up some additional acres on this rally in corn in the ice states, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa? The Western Corn Belt planting progress has been pretty quick, but this Eastern Corn Belt has been fairly slow because of this cool, wet weather.
Can you tell us about the challenges for the grains markets with these tariffs?
Yeah, the corn market is kind of relatively insulated here because China's not really buying any corn from anyone. It seems like our trade issues with Mexico and Canada have been alleviated, but regardless of the tariffs, the market's traded atypically of what's happened. In the first trade war, soybeans have not sold off. That was kind of the MO last time. And obviously China is not buying any U.S. soybeans right now. They're avoiding the U.S. at all costs, but the really has not impacted the board whatsoever. So ultimately, I mean, longer term, I mean, a lot of people are doing some mental gymnastics of what happens if China never buys another U.S. soybean. I think it's just what's happened in these trade wars is that people learn that this trade gets displaced and new trade flows emerge where others disappear.
Do you have any concerns about these tariffs for the future with China? It is mental gymnastics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I mean, I think ultimately China imports, 109 million metric tons of soybeans annually. Brazil exports 105, 106 million metric tons of soybeans annually. The rest of the world imports about 70 million metric tons. So that basically leaves the U.S., who typically exports around 50, and Argentina around 5 to fill in the gap. So does this potentially push? Does this potentially push China and Brazil closer as a business relationship? Yeah, probably. But that's been the case. Yeah, I think that was put into motion before the first trade war. So, China is always going to try to find the least cost producer. They buy from whoever's the cheapest. Now China is looking to buy from who's the most reliable. They don't like the rhetoric out of the United States. They don't like to be targeted. So they're going to do business with people who don't target them.
How concerned do you see that we are going to be in the R word on the economy?
I think it's common. We're the R word, obviously recession. I think the market sell-off we've had, the stock market is not the economy, obviously. But President Trump has amplified his targeting of Fed Chairman Powell as far as getting interest rates cut. And I think what happened in the bond market last week shows that there is some skittishness out here. As far as President Trump's, for lack of a better term, bull in a china closet type economic policy. We're just trying to do a whole lot of different things at the same time, and ultimately, I mean, I do think that we ultimately see a little bit of a recession here. It's the economic data though at this point still relatively strong. Unemployment's low. It's got to be from a credit standpoint. I think that if we get a recession, but we're playing a delicate dance of slowing inflation and interest rates, and throw in a tariff environment that is inflationary.
Do you have any final thoughts about the agricultural trade?
I'll say that I think that for now the markets are relatively range bound, and we've just had a fairly decent rally in the grain markets. The commitment of traders showed the funds are back in the market, or buying at least this week. I think the risk is, we get into May, June timeframes. I do think that we do find acres in the June report. So that's where potential seasonalities build for corn. But I would trade the ranges when we rally, make sales. The bean market has been a frustrating market because we really haven't had a whole lot of opportunities. But we're still in this $10 to $10.50 type range. I think look for opportunities if you're gonna want to be bullish beans. If the acres are as low as what they say they are, I mean, there's going to be some potential for friendliness in 2026 for the soybean market, and potentially sooner if we can put aside our differences or get a trade deal with China.
Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks, Caesar, for having me.
This is Garrett toay from Ag Trade Talk with Ag Trade Talk. Thanks to Garrett toay from Ag Trade Talk. This been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Caesar Delgado. You have a good day.